Well, Silverstone delivered an absolutely incredible race, dramatic, a lot of heartbreak in there for some riders. We're all at the circuit. We've just finished the debriefs on Sunday. Jordan Morland, Pete McLaren, and Lewis Duncan, as you can see, or if you're hearing or listening. The Grand Prix, it was a pretty eventful one. The first corner was Pete Alex Marquez looked like he was the favourite heading into the Grand Prix. He had a brilliant weekend. He won the sprint. He had delivered arguably his best performance, I'd say, in MotoGP in the sprint. And he gets to turn one, and it all goes wrong. And thankfully, the red flag for him that came and saved him. But yeah, a story of what could have been for Alex, really, wasn't it?
It was, because really all weekend we've been hearing how he was the guy. Mark was sort of saying, look, Alex is really special around here. Other riders saying the same. He went and proved it in the sprint race, beat Mark on track, fair and square for the first time. Obviously, Jerez, when he won the Grand Prix, Mark was at his instant and was coming back through the field. So this time, they were head to head. And Alex came out on top, really used his corner speed, the sort of renowned for, put it to good use around here. And, he was the guy people were looking at coming into Sunday. And then he grabs that great hole shot, and you think, well, this is going to play into his hands perfectly, but cooler conditions, needing to grab the front brake and hard to sort of disengage the ride height devices, which I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more of later in the podcast. But down he went, and absolute disaster. And then, as you mentioned, they got another chance, didn't they? Because we had the red flags, Mark fell off from the lead, Espargaro, Morbidelli, all this other stuff. So we get to second chance, but, it seemed like, didn't it, his confidence was just knocked a little bit. He knew that mistake, was really costly. He got this second chance and just wasn't really prepared to push the limits again on his spare bike, obviously, as well, things like that. So I suppose you could look at it either way, can't you? It's the glass half full thing. I mean, he did get that second chance. But clearly his pace, his potential was to do much more than he got in the end, which was fifth place. So good, solid points. But he was really the guy everyone was looking at coming into this race.
Absolutely. And Lewis, I'll throw it to you with Mark. Very lucky to be saved by a red flag, because that would have been his third crash in a Grand Prix. If it wasn't red flagged, and he was quite lucky to get the restart, but a really good recovery ride, I could say, because he looked like he was struggling with that medium front, and he made best of what he had, and he salvages a third place. Tough weekend for him, probably the toughest of the year so far. But yeah, how do you think that Mark comes out of the weekends? Looking at the championship, he's extended his lead over his brother and his teammate.
Yeah, well, he said it in the press conference himself that he was the luckiest rider on the grid today, because we had this red flag for a separate incident that left oil on the track, and we kind of we were all wondered, a bit confused, that maybe it was a problem further around the track as well. It was just coincidental that Marquez crashed at that Maggots and Beckett section when the red flags came out. He said actually that it was a little bit of what we've heard this year already, is he kind of has these little things he hasn't taken into consideration. I think this was a more difficult weekend for him, but generally his feeling on this factory Ducati has been really strong, and he knows that there's quite a lot of potential with it. But he said he didn't quite take into account the wind. It was very gusty out there in the Grand Prix on Sunday at Silverstone. We know Silverstone is an old airfield, so there's nothing to break the wind. So when you get gusts that are, you go to another circuit where there's buildings and hills and stuff in the way, it doesn't affect as much. It's a real problem here. And he had the medium front tyre, which we saw needed a few laps to get up to temperature. So the combination of things there for Marquez, but he was lucky, and lucky as well to survive quite a big moment at Copse on, early in the restart race. He got sucked into kind of an overtake behind Zarco, and ran wide and pulled Pecco into it as well by the looks of it. And that sent the two of them back. And then, it was a fight back from there. So to come away with the podium that he did is a huge result. To beat Alex Marquez is a huge result. With Pecco Bagnaia crashing out the race is a huge result for his championship. He's now 25 points clear. He's 72 now clear of Pecco Bagnaia, I think. So, that kind of, you remember sort of 10 years ago, when Marquez would have a crash or a big moment or something, anything that would have taken someone else out of a race, he seemed to survive it. And we always kind of joked that he's got, he's just got, all the lives of a cat, really. He's just got that type of luck. And we're kind of seeing that again. So, yeah, with all the results that have gone on, and there's a lot to talk about, I think he still comes out of this as the kind of the big winner, because his championship lead has grown. He's come through what I think we could probably agree will be his weakest round of the year, even more so than Barcelona will be, with, a podium in the Grand Prix and a podium in sprint and a lead over his championship rivals, and that's hard to beat.
Yeah, it is hard to beat when you look at it. I mean, he's finished second in a sprint and third in the Grand Prix on paper. It looks like it was a pretty good weekend, but as anything but, he looked like majority, like when I see the GP25 riders, that is, he's covering the problems there. You can clearly see that, and we'll touch about Pecco and what he said after. But we're, I think, 7 minutes into this podcast, or 5 minutes, and I'm sorry to everyone that's listening. Yeah, Marco Bezzecchi won on the Aprilia, by the way. Everything that's gone on with Aprilia, Pete, over the last few weeks with the Jorge Martin situation, statements being released. What a time for Aprilia to take the win. And I hadn't even said about how the win happened. We'll get into that as well. But Bezzecchi was outstanding in the sprint yesterday. At one point on lap 1, he was 19th and he finished 4th. So he clearly had something working for him this weekend. But to win the Grand Prix in this circumstance, sorry, Pete, that he did, it's very, I don't know, the best PR that Aprilia could have asked for, really.
Perfect timing, wasn't it? Yeah, as you say, after all the negative publicity and everything, here you are, a dream result, a win at a track where we know the Aprilia goes well. We know that Marco Bezzecchi has had the pace, hasn't he? Right from pre-season testing with those sprint race simulations, the speed has been there. Even recently at Le Mans in the sprint race there, he ran off, but when he came back on, and Massimo Rivola was underlining this, his pace was podium pace. So this is not kind of just a shot in the dark, come out of nowhere result, really. Aprilia have always felt that if Bezzecchi could qualify better, be further up in the early laps, he could run with the guys on the podium. And we saw today, he took his chance in these sort of the special track, special conditions on that soft tyre, doing really what Fabio was doing, but having to come from a lot, obviously, through the field, whereas Fabio was at the front and doing his thing. Unfortunate for Fabio, but, I don't think anyone will begrudge Aprilia and Bezzecchi this result under the circumstances, as you say, that they've been through. It's interesting, isn't it? But that I see almost similarities between when Jorge Lorenzo went to Ducati and all the attention was on this multiple world champion, and then it was Dovi sat next to him that ended up getting the wins and the success. Now, Bez has come in obviously at the same time as Martin, so it's not the same in that regard. But obviously, all of the attention has been on Martin, hasn't it? And then here we are. Bezzecchi's gone and got the first win for them. Martin obviously still not here, and we don't know when he'll be back. With his injuries and the situation he now has to sort out with Aprilia as well. But yeah, for Bezzecchi's side of things, really, it's exactly what they need, isn't it? For the whole team, his side of the garage. We said it about Alex Marquez. There's knowing that you can do it, and then there's actually doing it. And you can see for the celebrations, couldn't you, on the slowdown lap for Bez, that it meant a great deal to him.
Absolutely, Lewis. What did you think of the comments of Massimo Rivola after it was a message to Jorge that this bike can win? I mean, it's pretty bold, that, isn't it? And considering that it's literally the week of, or the statements and everything that came out, it's perfect timing, really, for Aprilia.
Yeah, I mean, motorsport has a funny way of doing that, doesn't it? There's perfect timing of things. You think back a couple of weeks ago, Zarco, French Grand Prix, first win for Honda, ends Ducati run. It's quite unusual to have 2 weeks in a row of something like that. But yeah, we came into Silverstone on Thursday. We were hit with quite a strong statement from Aprilia, weren't we? It was, basically these reports we're not negotiating, a performance clause, anything to do with that. The contract will be honoured until next year. And I think a couple of teams kind of told you, Pete, privately, that you don't make statements like that if you're not sure that's exactly what's going to happen. And since then, Aprilia really had, the riders have come and spoken to us, but they've shielded pretty much all the management, that we haven't really seen any of them. and the riders have had to kind of bear the brunt of all the questions. And, Bez as well, to his credit, really did have that diplomatic approach. There's a little element of reading between the lines of when he says, "I'm proud to be an Aprilia rider, really proud of the guys," whatever. It's a very subtle dig at Jorge Martin. Let's not gloss over that. But he was very kind of diplomatic about the whole thing, and then Rivola as well. Like you say, we can prove to Jorge Martin this is a winning bike. It was an interesting comment, I think, because to release a statement that they did and then make a comment like that does suggest that what we all believe, that the situation is actually quite bad. That Martin clearly does want to leave. They've obviously said, contracts must be honoured. They want to keep him there, but I think we're in a point where they're confident they can do that, but they then need to rebuild the trust. And I asked Massimo Rivola this in his debrief on Sunday that Aprilia organised. I said to him, you've spoken about this building a bike to give that trust back to Jorge Martin. What about the trust rebuilding that has to be done within Aprilia towards him? And he was, I think, quite telling without saying too much. He said, "Look, one thing at a time. We have to do one part first, and then we'll think about the other thing." So clearly, they're hurt. They're really, really hurt by this whole thing, and they're not quite willing to just because they want to keep him to the contract. They're not. This isn't a case of oh, please don't go, please don't. A jilted lover on their knees sort of thing. They're very, very deeply hurt by this, but they're going about it in a very constructive way because they know fundamentally that if this is a relationship that has to continue into next year, then it has to be done and rebuilt in a very, very healthy way. So, yeah, it will be interesting to see what Jorge Martin says next. He's teased, you'll hear my side of the story soon. If there's such a thing as a performance clause and they have successfully negotiated to extend it to Misano, like we've heard, then it's hard to see how a Grand Prix victory after 7 rounds of a championship, allows you to break a contract. But look, we don't know what's in that contract, so let's see.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll cover that more in detail throughout the next few weeks. I imagine there'll be more that'll come out because if Martin says the story's coming soon, let's see what he has to say. And yeah, I'll get on to probably the reason why Bezzecchi takes the win is poor Fabio Quartararo. He was outstanding today. He controlled that restart perfectly on the soft tyre. It was looking so good, Pete, and it just, in the blink of an eye, just went right out the vice, stuck, and he just couldn't fix it. And it was really heartbreaking seeing the TV shots, wasn't it? On his knees. And even in the debrief that we a couple of hours ago now, he broke down in tears and he had to compose himself. It's a real tough one for him and Yamaha to take, considering how good they were over the whole weekend. 3 pole positions in a row as well. Yeah, it's a real story of what could have been for Fabio.
Absolutely, isn't it? And Fabio's a heart on his sleeve kind of guy. Really always has been since he's been in MotoGP. But this one will really hurt, won't it? For obvious reasons. He'd done all the hard work. He had that lead. What was it? 7 laps to go. Bez wasn't going to catch him in the available time. Unfortunately, the bike just let him down there. And turns out that his teammate Alex Rins had a similar problem on the last lap, but Rins was much further back and was sort of able to nurse it to the flag. But nothing really that Fabio could do, as you say, Jordan. We saw him sort of grabbing the brake, didn't we, to try and sort of disengage or make the system work again. But Rins sort of explained that the oil leaks out. And once it's gone, that's it. There's nothing that the rider can do to raise the back of the bike again. And with so much of the race left, yeah, Fabio just had to park it, didn't he? And such a shame because he'd done everything right. We've seen with the pole position and then the start of the race this really amazing pace that he has on early on with new tyres that Yamaha struggled with for so many years to get this sort of 1 lap qualifying type performance, and he's really got it dialed in now. He's just saying it's nothing in particular that they've changed. It's partly it's not changing anything. It's keeping the bike the same, allowing him to build his confidence with the bike. But whatever it is, they've got it really working well over a single lap, and you see it not only in qualifying but in the start of the race. And lost out slightly to Bagnaia at the restart, didn't he? Immediately attacked and then was gone. And there was no looking back until, sadly, the back of the bike just didn't pop up as it should, and say nothing he could do. But it's going to hurt, as I say. Clearly, we saw that, but he knows what he and the bike are capable of. There will be other opportunities, and but a tough one to swallow.
Yeah, I'm pretty new to the media debriefs for this. I've done a few. You've done plenty, and so have you, Pete. I mean, there's the emotion from Fabio. I know you didn't see it, but someone to break down like that, it shows how much it means and how close he was to it. And how does he sort of regroup? Because as Pete says, there is opportunities, but it's always known that the opportunity was like right there. You could touch it almost.
Yeah, I think it obviously speaks to how tough things have been at the Yamaha camp for these past few years. This is a world champion. This is a rider that from the off in MotoGP has always been touted as a world champion. And he's put up with a lot, and he's continued to really wring the neck of the Yamaha and really bring it to positions that it really kind of wasn't capable of at points, over the last couple of years. And, today was the opportunity. He took a gamble on the soft tire. He came into the Grand Prix and said, look, I think I'm going to struggle here because the medium, there's low grip conditions at Silverstone and these really cold temperatures, and we're going to have to run the medium tire because of tire wear in the rear. It's not going to suit the Yamaha very much. I'm really, really expecting a struggle like it was in the sprint where he went from pole to 7th. But with that soft tire, he made it work. He's always said, if I can get out front and ride my lines, he can do what he needs to do in the Yamaha. So he was taking profit the soft tire while not chewing up the rear tire, letting the bike flow, and it can do that now. And this new aero upgrade that they brought this weekend, just a little upgrade, but it helped. It's a bit lighter. It makes the bike a bit more agile. And Fabio has then just done what we've expected Fabio to do, which is take it that 10% extra. Not the first time we've seen Fabio have big results taken away from him. Remember Jerez 2019, that first podium, he was absolutely distraught by that. Mizano 2019 that year, and Thailand as well that year. Remember the Thailand one? He was gutted because he was a corner away from winning the Grand Prix. There will be other opportunities. 3 pole positions in a row isn't a fluke. Let's be clear about that. 3 very different tracks with 3 very different grip levels as well. We saw this at Jerez. Fabio was surprised at why are we so quick on low grip conditions? So, well, yes, there might still be deficiencies with the bike, especially with the power. It's getting to a point where it can at least be competitive, especially in his hands. And, those opportunities will come. I think they go to Aragon now, not being maybe as disheartened as he might have been beforehand, given the low grip nature of that track and the flow nature of it as well. So let's see. I'd just like to point out as well, just on, yes, Fabio that was his race today, but Bez did the same strategy, soft front tire, and he was really chewing into Fabio's lap times as well. So I think he was going to have a hard fight in his hands to keep the Aprilia at bay come the end of the race. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see that, but Yamaha are coming. The 3 Yamahas in the top 10 in qualifying for the first time since 2021. 3 pole positions for the first time since 2021. They're on their way, and they'll get there. I think there will be a win this year. I do really genuinely do.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm sorry if you hear any noise in the background. It's just the Dorna staff taking down the paddock. So it is in the media centre. But yeah, just my thought on it. I actually feel really sorry for him in the sense of like the TV broadcast, I will say, conveyed the emotion very well of him capturing that shot of him just on his knees beside the Yamaha. I mean, we've seen that as well with Pecco Bagnaia. I think they've done a really good job of capturing what the emotion and what it means to these riders, and it shows that this sport is just, things can just change like that. And for Fabio, I think, as Lewis said, these pole positions aren't a fluke. They are. It's almost like a return of the old Fabio in qualifying that we're seeing, and it's it's great to see manufacturers other than Ducati personally up there. I mean, sometimes you think Ducati win everything, but last few races that we've had, we've seen plenty of other manufacturers get involved, and this is the turning point of MotoGP, I think. And I hope that it can continue, because there is struggles for Ducati. In particular, Pete, there are struggles for Pecco Bagnaia, who scores back-to-back non-scores for the first time since 2023. That was in Argentina and Coda. He has admitted now that he's got no front feeling. It's the first time in, I think he said, 4 years, really, that he just doesn't know what to do with the front because the feeling's not there. And he suffered the crash today. He nearly crashed in warm-up at the same corner, albeit in the wet. Pete, we've seen the frustration that he had. He nearly, tried to punch the screen through. He was that angry. What does Pecco do now? He's 72 points off Marc. The title's surely... He's not even thinking about that. He's trying to just even finish a race now because the feeling is so bad that he has with that front of the bike.
Yeah, exactly, isn't it? It's this track really sort of brought out the worst in the Ducati GP25, it seemed, didn't it? Not just for Pecco, but also for Marc. Digi did a good job, but Digi's actually he's very good on saving tyres. He's not sort of as famous for doing it as maybe an Bastianini or someone like that, but it's something that he sort of prides himself on, and I think that helped Digi on his GP25 this weekend, let's say. But yeah, Pecco, it was a continuation of what we've heard, but I think the circuit, the conditions, the cold, the wind, and everything else just sort of made it all the more worse. Having said that, and obviously we could see how devastated he was to crash out of the race, how angry it was. He warm up, as you mentioned there, Jordan. I think the fact that he spoke about, well, Marc is also now feeling what I'm feeling, and the fact that you could see the tyre wear in the sprint. So suddenly there's something that's a bit more concrete rather than just feeling. Do you know what I mean? And I think that maybe from that point of view, A, it might help Ducati give Pecco what he needs, but B, he probably feels like, well, look, there you go. This is what I've been telling you is happening, and now you can actually see it, visibly in the tyre wear. He was explaining, wasn't he, after the sprint, quite sort of calmly and sort of patiently, wasn't he, how he can't feel if he's using the soft front tyre or the hard on the bike. That's the level of sort of, I guess, almost numbness he has with the front of the bike. And then that was exaggerated in the wet warm-up and everything else. But because of that lack of front feeling, he's using the rear to turn the bike, working the rear more, and he ran out of tyre. And then, of course, interesting that Marc takes a different view of kind of, well, it's up to me as a rider to fix it, and saying that I've got to work around it, isn't it? So, yeah, still, I think we've got to see, is this going to continue? But more tracks, is this the absolute worst case scenario of the season? And then it'll go back to the situation before where Marc probably is thinking, look, it's one bad race. I was still competitive. I was still on the podium, as you've mentioned. It's job done for him, really. You can't win them all. But I think the question is this a sign that, the GP25 does have real difficulties in certain situations, particularly with the tyre wear?
Yeah, Lewis, have Ducati got a problem here with this? Because Marc is seemingly, as Pecco says, he's able to hide the issue. And we've heard that before with Honda riders saying that Marc's been able to cover up issues. Are Ducati in a bit of a difficult spot with this newer package? Because he wasn't great today either. Pecco obviously crashed out. You've said before about the moving targets of the 25. It seems that the window always moves on it compared to the more suited 24. What do Ducati do in terms of sort of, okay, we need to all just come together here and try and solidify it? Or is Marc just going to keep doing what Marc does and just basically use his riding ability to cover it up?
I did ask Gigi Dell'Igna about this last winter in November in Barcelona before the first day of the test when Marc was going to jump on the factory bike for the first time, and I said to him, is there a worry here that the same thing can happen at Ducati that happened at Honda, where Marc's going to come on the bike and he's going to start making a difference? And he brushed it off. He was very like, if we brought Marc here, it's for good reasons, etc., etc. But without that kind of mistake at Copse Corner today in the Grand Prix. I suspect Marc was probably still winning that Grand Prix. His pace was good. The way he cut his way through the field to get back into podium contention was strong. I think, a race of high tyre wear, that's his kind of forte really now at this point on this factory bike. Remember back to Qatar, it was a very kind of similar looking race. So they are in a bit of a quandary where you've got Marc riding around the problems. So they have issues to fix. I think they know that. But you can't push it too hard, because if Marc loses his feeling, then your guaranteed kind of podium guy at the very least is going to start finishing on the podium. And I think the balance of power now after 7 rounds, which is early, I know, but with the results that Pecco Bagnaia has had and the fact he's now 72 points off the championship, you can't really bank on him anymore. And that's a difficult spot for Pecco to be in, and he knows that, because he's repeatedly said this weekend, Marc can ride around it, I can't. And Marc said this in his debrief on Friday, actually, after end of sprint, when he got resoundingly beaten by his brother Aleix Marquez. That we've tried 4 or 5 different setups, and I couldn't get any of them to work. So I'm the problem here. And this is what riders need to understand, is if you try so much with the setup and you can't find a solution, then the rider is the problem. Which is a bit of a dig at Pecco as well, I think, given what he's been saying. But he backs it up by saying, look, Marc can do it, I can't. And that's tricky, because if there's a problem that one can ride around and the other can't, as a manufacturer, how do you fix that? It's the Honda problem again. So, yeah. I think this is an anomaly weekend. I think a lot of people are making the fact that, Ducati not really looked like they were kind of in it for the Grand Prix win. First and foremost, Aleix Marquez would have won that Grand Prix had it not been for that crash at Turn 1 in the original start. Everyone has said that. I think had Marc had the cleaner race, he would probably won that Grand Prix on the restart. So I think it's a bit of an anomaly this weekend. It's never, Marc said it's never been his strongest circuit. And since the injury, it's been even weaker for him, because the way you have to hustle right-hand corners, you just can't do with the injuries that he's gone through. So I think we get back to Aragon. I think we get back to a more normal situation. But Ducati does need to be aware now that on their off weekends, they can't even really necessarily rely on the satellite riders anymore, because Aprilia has clearly made a bit of a step. Bez did say nothing has really changed with the bike. It just, the weak points aren't as accentuated. The stability problems under braking aren't a problem at Silverstone. Yamaha's Honda's getting there. They do need to now be looking over their shoulder. And they're not under major threat yet, but the weekends where they struggle, they can't necessarily expect to come away with as big a points haul as they maybe could have done last year.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Lewis, with the weak point. Like I say, we're speaking to all the Ducati riders today, whether it be 24, 25, they all had weird races at some point. Like, you think before that restart, Fermin Aldegar was 3rd, and he looked really good. Franco Morbidelli was taken out by Aleix Espargaro, and then that triggers the red flag. But then Franco nearly gets the podium in the restart. And then Aleix Marquez, as you say, Turn 1, completely destroys his momentum, takes him a while to get back into the race. Also, his bike setup too, probably more predominantly set up for the wet. You could probably say as well plays a factor into it. Yeah, it's weird for Ducati, a weird weekend in Silverstone. And I think that the key for me, the takeaway from the factory side, is this has been 2 Grand Prix weekends now in France and here that Pecco has said that Marc is making the difference. His tone, how he's talking about Marc, he's making it clear that Marc is the factor here that's basically covering up the issues. How does Pecco mentally recover from that? Because once you've said it out there and it's in the public, everyone's just going to assume Marc's better than you. Why are you not doing this? It's a real difficult spot, isn't it?
It is, and I think he sort of raised a point that I think we raised on the previous podcast, which is that, look, I'm the only guy, this is Pecco, who's gone 24 to GP25. And so that's why he says he feels these differences that maybe Marc and the others don't feel so much. We're still hearing, aren't we? Marc told us that the GP24 and the GP25 is almost the same, or pretty much identical. When we believe the engine is different, don't we? And certain other things like that. Pecco said theoretically they're very similar, but for him, there's this difference in feeling. To put it in perspective, Pecco said, look, we're talking small details here, he believes. But for Pecco, the reality is from his side, the front doesn't feel like it did on the 21, the 22, the 23, and the 24. And so that experience of the Ducati in a strange way is almost sort of a disadvantage in that regard, in that you're looking for something that you remember as being really strong in the past, whereas Marc is just getting on a bike and going, right, how do I ride it? He's had a lot of difficult bikes during his career, hasn't he, and been able to ride around it. So I think they're just coming at it from different angles. And but as far as Ducati, I don't think, and Gigi's always been very good at this. He listens to all of the riders, doesn't he? It doesn't matter. Like, he'll be listening to what Fermin Aldeguer says about the bike, and in terms of the feedback on the 24, he always listens to all of the riders and then looks for sort of common themes and how to develop it to make it a bike that has been good for all these different riders. But we've got to see now if they can get to the bottom of this feeling issue, this turning issue. But as you guys have said, you've also got to put it in perspective. This wasn't a disaster for them, certainly as far as their main guy, Marc, in the championship. Okay, he's in third. It is very rare to have two different manufacturers finishing in front. Would have been three if Fabio had got to the flag as well. Let's remember that. But it was it was a crazy race, a bit of a crazy conditions as well. There's no need for Ducati to panic at all about this. But from Pecco's side, he's really struggling with the sort of the strong point of his riding style that he still can't find, and that's a difficult thing for him. And he's, well, as he said, we've been asking him, how do you solve this? And he said, it's for all of us. I think he's used the word, it's a failure of everybody if we don't, get this bike working the way we want. So he's not singling out, he's not saying it's the fault of, the people that designed the bike, or it's the fault of me, or he's saying that all of us need to work together, the team, the factory, riders, crew chiefs, and get on top of this, because he does believe that it's an issue. He says, look, if you take Alex Marquez's data, he's doing what I was doing last year on that bike. Alex won the sprint race, actually, at a slightly slower speed than Enea Bastianini the previous year on the 24. Slightly different conditions, but still, it does illustrate that, maybe there is something there. And as I say, I think, as you guys have mentioned, that the Marc and the Honda comparison, you have always got to be aware that Marc he can just ride pretty much anything, can't he? And that's the bottom line. So,
as Pecco says, he can ride a tractor and make it competitive. So
there we go.
What does that tell you, Pete? And also, just to say, I wouldn't want to be Pecco Bagnaia heading to Aragon next, which we've seen Marc Marquez, what he can do around there. Obviously, track dependent on conditions. It was very dirty last year. Pecco really struggled. We'll see what happens in 2 weeks' time. But yeah, Ducati have a lot of work to do with Pecco, and Pecco has to try and figure it out. How long it's going to take, we don't know, because he doesn't know. He keeps saying that. They're trying to group together, as you both say. But yeah, this is a real test in time for the relationship between Pecco and Ducati at the minute. So we'll see what will happen. The final question before we wrap up, gents. Who was the biggest winner and loser this weekend in the MotoGP class? Lewis, I'll start with you. Give us your two picks.
I guess biggest winner from a championship perspective is Marc. In a weekend where a race where he crashed, and he still comes away with with the podium and with the championship lead extended. So, but certainly Aprilia. I mean, there's really four winners really, because the pace of the Honda as well was genuine in the dry, and that's impressive. And obviously the pace of the Yamaha when it could get into its groove is impressive. And then obviously Aprilia with the Martin situation. Biggest loser, I mean, it's Pecco and it's KTM as well. The KTM came to a low grips circuit, and oh boy did they struggle. And they're all now starting to get a bit angry about it. They're like, we need the factory here to pull their finger out. So yeah, there's a lot to be digesting over the next couple of weeks before we get to Aragon.
Absolutely. Please, if you're listening, watching, go and read when they're up there Enea Bastianini's comments. Worst race of his career that he told me. He wanted to pull into the box like several times throughout the race because he felt there was no point. Maverick Vinales was nowhere. Brad Binder was nowhere. Pedro Acosta is very strong in his comments. He's saying that he's not patient and he's, he can never, what's the word? Always wait for KTM to deliver before, that unravels. So yeah, KTM, I would agree, Lewis. I think they're the biggest loser. Pete, who for you is the biggest winner in terms of, we'll take Mark out of it. Who's the biggest winner this weekend?
Yeah, I think Bezzecchi and Aprilia, literally. But as we say, just the timing of all this. When you think just back a couple of days when we arrived here on Thursday, the situation at Aprilia, it had been silent, and we hadn't had any official comment about the whole Martin situation, and that came out on Thursday morning. No further comments officially from Aprilia since then, but it's obviously been a big talking point for the whole weekend. What's going on there? What's going to happen? What's the future? All obviously negative things, and then suddenly they end up on the top step on Sunday. And let's not forget, this is the first win also for the new technical side, if you like, of Aprilia, with Fabiano Stellacchini coming in. There would also have been a question mark there of Romano Bessiano had led that project right from when they came in with the RSGP to MotoGP. So to show, it's that confidence thing, isn't it? To show to the riders, to everybody that we can do this, we can win. We have got a winning package, and if that's what Jorge Martin was starting to doubt, well, we don't know what he was thinking when he was watching the race at home, as I'm sure he would have been. Hopefully, he says he's going to tell us his side of things soon. Massimo Rivola was asked, wasn't he, does he have any idea what Martin's going to say? And he said no. So, everyone's sort of waiting to hear what Martin will tell us at some point about what's happened over the last couple of weeks. But the bottom line is the Aprilia RSGP is back on the top step of the podium for the first time since Vinales at Cota last year. So, yeah, I think for me, all round, it's for winners, it's Aprilia. But, Honda and Zarco, that's another great result for them. You could even view the Yamaha result as negative as it ended. And actually moving on, I'd have to say they're my biggest loser because, that's they really, really needed, I think, not needed, but deserved that win as well. They've been building up to it, and I would have been, great for Fabio. As you guys have said, he's been really riding out of his skin. So, biggest loser in the sense of they should have had that one, or at least had a great battle, with Bez for it in the closing laps. Who knows how things would have worked out? But really sorry to see it end that way. But there we are. That's racing, and it's got fallen into the hands of Aprilia. So let's see what the next race brings. It could all change around and go the other way.
Absolutely, yeah. I both agree with your winners. My biggest loser, I'll say it in terms of a championship perspective. Controversy, I think it's Alex Marquez is the biggest loser because it's the best weekend I've seen him put together. Yes, he didn't get pole position, but what I seen in that sprint race was generally beating his brother for the first time was outstanding. I mean, anyone will go back and watch what he was doing through turn 7, 8, 9. He was just magic to watch, and he even said yesterday in his debrief after the sprint that he was the favourite. He usually says he's going to be maximum of second. Well, turn 1, I mean, it's a heartbreaker for Alex, but go and read his comments after. He's very strong on the safety of the circuit too, and ride height devices. It's one of those things that we've heard plenty over the weekend, especially because there's been Fabio, Alex Rins, as you say, Pete, and Ed Bastianini told me as well that he had an issue with the ride height. Alex too, at the start of the race. They're going to be gone, but there's a talking point here, and we can talk about that more in another episode. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the weekend in terms of the racing. I think all 3 races were fantastic. The crowds, I mean, I don't want to talk about that out loud at the circuit, but yeah, go look at the numbers. I think a lot of people missed out on truly great races this weekend. And yeah, it sure rolls on. We'll head to Aragon next. Pete will be there. We'll have a test after that too. And yeah, Marc Marquez somehow extends his championship lead over his brother. And what happens next in MotoGP, I couldn't tell you, because the last 2 Grand Prix, anything can happen. So yeah, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, comment on who your rider of the weekend was. And until next time, we'll see you then. Take care.